All right, so our discussion is being recorded. We appreciate you joining us. This is the monthly series that we've been conducting now for close to a year now, bringing in various speakers, renowned speakers from the region who are working on interesting areas. We try to bring in conversations that can be helpful to our local businesses, local leaders. And today we've got a great conversation lined up. We've got Jason Ray, who's the Executive Director of Southwest Missouri Community of Governments, Council of Governments, and he is spearheading this discussion related to the census that's upcoming in 2020. And this is a really important conversation for a variety of reasons, and often a conversation that communities don't pay a lot of attention to, that have a lot of ripple effects. So we're glad Jason's here to share some insights on how to think about this conversation, and more importantly, what we could be doing locally to get more engaged and sort of get our share of the federal economic pie. Before we get into the conversation, really quick, wanted to make everyone aware of some of the platforms that are there. So if you like today's conversation, if you want to share today's conversation with some of your friends, colleagues, peers, please note you can go to our online platform called Business 911. So you can go to Business 911, you click on Grow Missouri. When you get there, you'll see a variety of options. One of the options there takes you to our previous recording of all of our discussions. And we've got some great leaders that have shared their insights on business development, community development, et cetera. So in the next 24, 48 hours, we will have today's conversation also available online for you. So with that, I will shut up and I'll let Jason take over. And Jason, what I'll do is I'll flip back and forth between the slides, and I'll minimize the slides so that folks can see you clearly. So just let me know when you want to share your slides, and I'll bring them up.
Okay. Well, hopefully everybody can hear me okay. Thank you, Rashu, for inviting me to share this information. As he said, I'm the Executive Director of the Southwest Missouri Council of Governments. I'll get into a little bit of an overview of who we are in the next slide or two, but today I'm going to give an overview of our organization, and then the 2020 census, our regional complete count committee efforts, what the census data is used for, and its economic impact on the state of Missouri and our region. And then what you can do to help ensure a more accurate count for the 2020 census itself. And I'll just note that my office is located in downtown Springfield on the square. It's the birthplace of Route 66, and it's a beautiful day right now. The rain hasn't reached us. So I also have really thin windows, and occasionally people, motorcycle groups will cruise by my office. So if there's some loud background noise, I'll just pause for a moment and let them cruise on by. So just to be warned about that. But we can get started now. A little bit about our organization. As I said, the Southwest Missouri Council of Governments, we're a regional planning commission serving 10 counties in Southwest Missouri. The state of Missouri is broken up into 19 regional planning commissions. So anybody from the Salem area, if you're on, you'd be in the Merrimack region, kind of region number 9 over there on the map. And then anybody from Sarcoxie would be in the Harry S. Truman Coordinating Council area, but Aurora and Buffalo are within the service area that we have here at SMCOG. We do have over 100 members of our board of directors who represent local governments, organizations, state legislators, and other stakeholders. We provide general planning services for communities and for the region. We help set regional policies. We work with local public policy as well. And we're essentially an extension of local government. So anything that cities or counties need, we have professional staff that can help accomplish their goals or help provide technical assistance as they need. As an organization, we use census data almost daily as we plan for the region and for our communities. We use income data for grant applications and equity planning. We use population growth trends to help guide development, annexations, and public services. And we use data for transportation planning and economic development purposes. And we can move on. So just an overview of the census itself. It only comes once every 10 years, so people aren't really knowledgeable about the census. So knowledge is fairly low since it only comes once a decade. But a quick overview is, the purpose of the census is to count the population and housing within the country and deliver those results to the President of the United States. The founding fathers of our country were pretty quick to line this out as a government for and by the people. So the Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution says that representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among the states, which may be included within the Union according to the respective numbers. And then they outline that that will be counted every 10 years with an enumeration. So the overall goal of the census is to count everyone in the country once, only once, and in the right place. So why is the census important? You can move on, Rishu. The census will be conducted April 1st, 2020. That's the official census day. But the census data that is collected is used to allocate hundreds of billions of federal dollars each year. And it's also set to define district boundaries for representation in Congress and our state legislatures. You'll see on the slide that I've quoted the Census Bureau in stating that over $675 billion is allocated every year based on data derived by the census. But this information comes from just the top 132 federal programs. You'll see other reports, if you dig deeper into census information, that will include the top 300 federal programs, and they will highlight that it actually impacts over $900 billion a year. So it's a huge component to allocating our federal tax dollars and distributing them back to the states. The states then take that information or that money as well and distribute them to the region and local levels based on local census data. So a few other items that census data is used for is analyzing local trends for both communities and for businesses, attracting new businesses to state and local areas, forecasting transportation needs and construction costs and needs, planning for hospitals, nursing homes, or other healthcare services, forecasting future housing needs for communities, planning school district boundaries, planning for faith-based organizations even, establishing fair market rents and enforcing fair lending practices, understanding consumer needs, making other business decisions, spotting trends in economic well-being of the nation, and much more. In fact, the census has a number of tools available online to communities and to business owners and other organizations. One that I could highlight is the Census Business Builder, which includes employment data and wages. So this tool helps business owners compare quarterly employment rates with weekly wage data and learn how their business compares to other businesses like them. So on our website, smcog.org, we have a link to the top 50 uses for census data, and you'll see everything from utility planning to, again, school district boundaries, transportation needs, business decisions. Pretty much everybody in any sector can rely on some piece of data that is derived by the census. So next I'm going to talk about what we're calling complete count committees. There's different structures and different levels of complete count committees, but essentially they're a partner to convene governments, nonprofits, corporations and other community organizations to work together to develop solutions to help reach everybody in the nation and within our region to encourage them to respond to the 2020 census. So there's several makeups for these committees. There are local committees. I know we've got one set up in Polk County, Christian County, and the Branson area. But we are facilitating the Regional Complete Count Committee. And so for our 10-county region, our board of directors asked us to get together mostly more larger regional organizations like the Council of Churches, healthcare providers that operate throughout the area, Community Foundation of the Ozarks is a partner on our committee, as well as organizations or entities that are in areas that don't have a local complete count committee. So we've brought them on as well, particularly large employers or anybody who houses anybody, universities, jails, and other organizations like that. So the Regional Complete Count Committee is to provide support to local complete count committees where they exist, and then to help coordinate regional efforts. We will create a 2020 census awareness campaign based on the knowledge of the committee members, and we will use them in various media events and other outreach efforts throughout the process of the census. So essentially a complete count committee, right now they're in the midst of forming across the nation and hosting their kickoff meetings. We just had one about a month ago here in Springfield, and starting to coordinate with media. I just did an interview with Color 10 News in my office yesterday that should be airing this evening about current census efforts and the impacts to our region, along with some other operations that they've got going on right now that I'll talk about in a moment. The complete count committees will also participate in census rallies, or as the guide that is provided by the census suggests, perhaps parades. I always chuckle a little bit and say that I hope that we can be the first region in the nation to have a census parade. And I've already identified what confetti cannons I want to use for that event. But essentially, we will be coordinating with the census, hosting youth forums to get students and youth involved in the count itself. We will host interfaith breakfasts and other weekend events. We'll encourage the use of statistics and information derived from the census in schools and classroom resources. We will incorporate census information into newsletters through, again, those interfaith organizations, social media posts, podcasts, blogs, and other outlets. But another purpose of the Complete Count Committees is to help the census recruit workers. They do employ a large workforce, and it takes a lot of people to make sure that the census is completed accurately and effectively. So what can you expect for the process of the 2020 census? Right now, as I mentioned, these Complete Count Committees are forming. And the 2020 census is hiring right now. We're about to enter peak hiring season for the census. Right now, we are also working on earned and social media attention and push from the Census Bureau itself. And our partner Complete Count Committees are initiating our activities. But right now, August through October, you might start to notice census workers actually in your communities or walking your neighborhoods, particularly in rural areas. So right now we're in the address canvassing operation for the census. There's over 140 million households in the nation. This year, we added 5.3 million new addresses, and those were verified using the US Postal Service. Another 106 million addresses were verified by information from local governments or tribal and state agencies. So your city or your county may have reported to the census several months ago where new development has occurred over the past decade. They may have reported new subdivisions or annexations into your community. But now we're actually in the phase where they're putting boots on the ground, sending census workers out to to confirm other addresses that weren't confirmed in other methods. In 2010, the census hired over 150,000 address canvassers who walked around almost every block in the nation. This year, they did most of that work in-house using satellite imagery and using these other databases with the US Postal Services and local governments. So this year, for the 2020 census, they are only hiring 40,000 address canvassers for in-field work to be walking the neighborhoods and streets within your communities. So after the address canvassing, we will see in October to March the peak recruitment drive for hiring census workers. And then in January, you will see paid advertising starting. So we'll be utilizing TV, radio, print, or digital advertisements. One more note about the current operation with address canvassing is it's important to note that this is not the count itself. So you will see official census workers who will have census IDs, census branded bags and laptops, but they will not be collecting any personal data or counting the number of residents in each household. They were just here to verify those addresses. So again, one of our roles is to identify a communications plan for assisting with the census. So you'll see right now we're in our strategic early education phase. So doing activities like this and talking to people about the importance of the census, how the census is going to be structured this year, and then how you can respond. So in January, as I mentioned, we'll be entering into the awareness phase with our paid media, with TV spots. You might even see some billboards go up. Here in Springfield, we will have some bus wraps on the transit system. And then in March, about a month before the census day itself on April 1st, we will move into the motivation phase, where we will encourage people to actually respond to the census. Then, of course, we will remind people who haven't responded to the census starting in May through the summer. And then we will thank everybody who did participate. And then the data will be disseminated and delivered to the president on December 31st of 2020. And you'll start seeing news reports and analysis of that data starting in January 2021. I'll also note that the Missouri Foundation for Health has been designated by our statewide Complete Count Commission to lead the effort for the state in developing messaging and identifying specific communication strategies across the state. So locally and regionally, as we develop our communications plans and outreach efforts, we will be relying on the Foundation for Health and their consultant in using their targeted messaging once those results are delivered in about a month or so. So again, this is just to reiterate that March to August, we have a huge push and exposure through the Census Bureau and through our local partners. Mid-May through August, the census takers will actually be visiting houses next year for those who didn't respond to the census. And then in December throughout 2021, we'll have news coverage of the results. So every household in the nation will have the option of responding to the census either by online or through the mail or by the phone. This is the first census in our history that will be conducted primarily online. But not every household will receive an invitation to participate either online or through their phone. So about 20% of households will actually receive a physical mailed form for the census. And there's actually counts going on right now in remote areas like in Alaska, northern Maine, places that are difficult to get counts. They're actually going door to door already right now to meet with those people and start counting those areas. We can go ahead and move on to the next slide. So as I said, the census will be completed online, by phone, or by mail. The website will be mobile friendly and will be available in 13 different languages. The phone option will be available in 15 languages, and for those with hearing impairments. 80% of the nation will receive an invitation to respond online, while 20% will receive the invitation to respond online and will receive a paper questionnaire. That 20% has been identified or selected based on internet availability across the nation or their likelihood to respond online, plus other factors. So everyone gets a reminder piece of mail after the first round. You'll see on the slide here, I've got what you can expect. In March, everybody will receive a postcard inviting you to respond to the census online. And everybody will receive that mail piece number 2, a reminder letter, because just the timing, it goes out 4 to 5 days after the initial postcard goes out. So even if you've responded to the census after you got your first invitation, you'll still get a reminder letter at that point. But after that, for anybody who hasn't responded, they'll get a 3rd piece of mail from the census as a reminder. And then if they still haven't responded in April, they'll receive another reminder to respond online, but at that point, they'll also receive a paper questionnaire. So anybody can respond to the census with a paper form, but they will have to wait until that 4th piece of mail comes out. So nobody can call the census and specifically request a paper form. They'll just have to wait until mid-April until that paper form comes out. So individuals or households will receive 5 pieces of mail before a census taker will actually show up in person. So, or if they completed the census very late, they still might get a visit from a census worker. The more people who respond on their own, the faster and cheaper the census will be. So a big piece of our communications plan will be to encourage people to respond early and online to help decrease the cost overall for the census. The number one way to get people to respond is by personalizing it and showing how the census impacts their community, such as talking about after-school programs or other programs that I'm about to talk about. So some other census-derived allocations. These are popular programs that I wanted to highlight here. Child Care and Development Funds, which is an entitlement program. WIC programs, State Children's Health Insurance Program, Head Start or Early Head Start programs, the National School Lunch Program, Medicaid and Medicare even, SNAP, Title I grants to local education agencies, and even foster care. And as I mentioned, there's about 300 federal programs that if you research, you can show that over $800 billion are allocated every year based on information derived from the census. I do want to highlight some populations that are difficult to count. In fact, the most undercounted populations in the nation are young children, minorities, rural residents, low-income households, those who don't speak English or one of the top 13 languages in the nation, foreign-born, low educational attainment individuals, and single-parent households. So what is at stake? Some other uses for the census, Rishu, you can forward on, is setting interest rates and other programs that support a strong and vibrant workforce across the nation. Census data informs business and nonprofit organization decisions, where to locate, market sizes, market share, wages, as I mentioned before. And of course, highway planning and construction funding, and how congressional and state legislative districts, school districts, and voting precinct boundaries are drawn. In 2016, an example is Missouri received over $16 billion through the top 55 federal spending programs guided by data derived from the 2010 census. I've highlighted some of those there. And there's a report from the George Washington University, their Center for Public Policy, that did a much deeper dive into these federal programs and what the Census Bureau actually did. And so, as I said at the beginning of the presentation, you'll hear and see several different numbers regarding how much federal funding is reliant on the census data. Those are just based on the level of depth that agency went into to research. The census stopped at the top, I think, 150 programs, but the George Washington University dove into the top 300. But as we've seen for the state of Missouri, the potential annual reduction in federal funds for every household missed in the census count would equate to about $4,700 per household per year for 10 years that is missed in that count. So you can see on the next one, diving a little bit deeper, you can see some of the specific programs highlighted in that George Washington University study and the amount of dollars that's been obligated to the state of Missouri for those specific programs. And this is just based on 1 year worth of allocations to the state. And again, I put that list of other uses for data, for census data that I highlighted earlier on in the presentation. But you can see, I mean, Section 8 housing, over $240 million to the state of Missouri over the 10-year period, and all these other programs. It really adds up and really impacts the state of Missouri. And moving on, I will also highlight that in 2010, nationwide, we experienced an undercount. On average, it was about 1% for the entire nation that was missed during the 2010 undercount. It was even higher for certain segments of the population, mostly minorities. But also in 2010, we saw a significantly low count of young children and those who live in temporary quarters. So those who live in dormitories like Missouri State University or in jails or prisons. The young children component of the undercount last decade was really alarming, and the census is putting out a lot more information about how we can make sure to more accurately count those children. As I've mentioned throughout the presentation, that early childhood education programs and after-school programs, foster programs, there's several programs that benefit children and families with young children that rely on census data. So we're making a concentrated effort to ensure that we get a more accurate count of the young children population within our region. And that stems from kind of the nuclear family or the non-traditional family structures that we might see. So if there's a child whose family has shared custody, split parents, they might be confusion about where to actually count that child. They might not actually get counted in the census at all. So we'll be rolling out information in public education about how to make sure that children are accurately counted in our region. Missouri ranked number 24 in 2010 when it came to response rates to the census. And our state demographer estimates that we left $8 billion on the table over that 10-year period because of an undercount for the state of Missouri. Also, as I mentioned, the census is used to determine legislative districts. And in 2010, the state of Missouri actually lost one of our US House districts. So not only did we leave some money on the table from federal funds, but we lost representation in the US House of Representatives. And there's a resource here that you might be able to visit afterwards. If you would like to get more information about hard to count areas and hard to count populations, there's an interactive map that the census has put together, Census Hard to Count Maps 2020.us. And you can zoom in onto census tracts within your area and figure out what populations near you might be identified as hard to count. So what the Regional Complete Count Committee here is to do, and what our staff here at SMCOG is working on now, is identifying those communities that are most at risk of undercounting and those populations. We will be identifying community assets, neighborhood organizations, and other resources for assistance. So this is really the purpose of the committee on the regional level, to get everybody at the table and identify outreach strategies and resources that we might be able to share. One great idea that was just presented a couple weeks ago was purchasing some Chromebooks or some other tablets that we can move around the region to libraries or school districts or other places, so those who don't have access to internet can come into a central location and respond to the census using those tablets. And then we'll mobilize our community partners to coordinate that outreach effort and reach out to our most hard to count populations. So our ongoing efforts is maintaining our website, smcog.org/census. We have a ton of information up there and a few recent press releases about our operations. We'll coordinate the regional outreach efforts, as I've been talking about. We'll provide data, statistics, and information, and even maps to local partners or regional partners throughout the area. And we'll coordinate with the Census Bureau and our State Complete Count Commission. And actually, the governor appointed the chair of the statewide Complete Count Commission is the former mayor of Branson, and so we have a Southwest Missouri tie to the statewide effort as well. So you can help become a partner by either joining the regional Complete Count effort, or you can form a local Complete Count committee yourself. You can help us coordinate media events and identify local elected officials or public figures that might be great at talking about the census and connecting with people in the region. Identifying areas in your community that might be able to provide access to the internet to those who don't have access readily available. And then just generate ideas and share information. You can get in touch with us or other partners within your region of how you can coordinate improving response rates in your area to the census. I do want to note that you should not collect data from residents. Even if you do intend to submit it online to the census, it is not legal for anyone to complete the census on someone else's behalf. We discourage anybody from going door to door, actually collecting that information. We have seen in 2010, some mayors or some politicians went door to door to talk to people about the importance of the census, and I think that's appropriate. Just don't collect any information during that time. And we can talk about how to identify census workers whenever they do go out. As I mentioned earlier, they're currently doing the address canvassing, and when they go out to do the household visits for anybody who didn't respond to the census, you can go online. There will be information on the census website about how to identify them, but they'll always have a census ID card, a census branded bag, and a census branded laptop. But there's also a staff directory that you can insert anybody's name into the census website and verify their credentials that way. And the last thing I do want to note on this one is the census will be conducted primarily online, but it will not be conducted through social media. So one thing to be alert of is any scams or anybody trying to trick you into giving information through a Facebook post or a tweet or something like that, or the only way that we'll be collecting information for the census is through the official census website. It will be spelled out on the postcard that every household receives to invite them to be to go to the website. But just be mindful that there will be, as every decade, somebody trying to work the system and collect people's personal data. And the census will never ask for bank account numbers. It doesn't cost anything to respond, so nobody should ever have to pay a fee to respond to the census. So at this point, I can open it up for a few questions before I get to the last specific action steps. I did provide some resources here as well through our organization, through Missouri Foundation for Health, and then of course the census website itself is a wealth of information. But if anybody has any initial questions Hopefully I've done a decent job explaining the importance of it. There's a lot of programs that rely on the census and a lot of information that can be used for business purposes and for community planning efforts, as you see. So if there's any questions or any unique outreach ideas, we are taking those as well at this time.
By chance, do you, sorry, can you guys hear me?
Go ahead, Shannon.
Okay. By chance, do you have any idea what the rate percentage was of the census being returned from households in our area, or just overall in general?
We do have that on our website. I know for our region, it was about 80, I think mid 80%. If you go to the SMCOG website, that we've got a map that has all the census tracts in our area and the percent of the response rate. I'm not sure if I can pull that up quickly enough. And I'm sorry, is this Aurora that was asking that?
Yes.
Let's see. It looks like it was in the, I want to say, upper 70s, low 80%.
And if we join in to become a partner, would we be able to get branded items to promote the census, like posters or postcards or?
Yes, so branded materials will be available to anybody who would like them. We've got our Southwest Missouri kind of complete count logo that we're using, but we'll primarily rely on what's coming out of the Foundation for Health's outreach efforts. So in, I think, mid-September, early October, they're going to have a communications packet come out with their kind of taglines or target messaging, and then we'll have staff here. We've got a graphic designer on staff and others that will package all that into Missouri-specific and Southwest Missouri-specific messaging and materials. And so we can definitely get that to you. And also, if you identify, specific populations in your area, one example I know, I think in the Monette area, there's a high Burmese population. So if there's a unique population within your area, we can try to target messaging specifically for them if you can come up with a good outreach effort to reach them specifically.
Great question, Shannon. I've got a few questions, Jason. Just wanted to get your thoughts. One, I know some of our communities have a fairly high minority population. And just given the number of developments related to minorities, any guidance on what we can be doing to ensure that we're getting the counts in with minorities? And then certainly you mentioned the young people as well. Any unique strategies that the community should be thinking about to encourage engagement there?
Well, the first thing I want to point out is I know there was a hot topic over the last probably year or two regarding the citizenship question on the census. That has been put to rest. There is not going to be a citizenship question on the census, regardless of the politics involved on that. The census has, or the federal government has, a better way of identifying who's an immigrant living in the country. And the Constitution says that we're supposed to count everybody. It doesn't specify their citizenship status. But that the potential of that question was potentially going to threaten response rates in certain minority populations, immigrant populations. And so it's going to be important to educate everybody that that question is not on the census in 2020. So hopefully to encourage a more accurate response, because those people living in our communities do make an impact, and we want to make sure that they are counted appropriately and effectively within our region. So that's going to be one messaging item, is that that question is not going to be included in the census. We will have multiple languages for materials that are being produced. There are already a few available through the census website. But as I said, if you've got a unique population within your area, like the Burmese speaking population, let us know. We can coordinate or dig and find those specific resources themselves. When it comes to the young children, we're primarily working with early childhood education centers, libraries, and school districts to help identify students or kids who might be living in those unique household settings, the foster programs, anybody with parents living in multiple locations and having shared custody. So we're working with those organizations, school districts and whatnot to identify those families, and because of the sensitive relationship and nature of that, we'll rely on those organizations to communicate with parents and let them know how and when to actually count their kids and where they reside.
Okay. And do the schools have a role in this as well? Should our school leaders, should we be speaking with our principals or superintendents? Is that, I'm sure that's part of sort of the standard strategy, but is there something else we should be doing there as well?
Absolutely. So we do have a few superintendents and a few representatives from schools around the region on our Regional Complete Count Committee, and we're hoping to engage with the Association of Superintendents across the state for them to push information out to the local school districts. But yes, they will be a huge key in getting education to families. We find that when students are educated and excited about something and know the importance of it, they go back home and sit at the dinner table and educate their parents about it. So it's an effective outreach tool just to educate students. It's also a good civics lesson about how our government works and how we identify representation across the country. So for a number of reasons, we are definitely engaging with schools, and you should be engaging your schools at the local level with your committees or within your community. So yeah, definitely we are reaching out and working with them very closely.
And to just this particular conversation, we've got GROW leaders in this conversation in Buffalo and Aurora, and certainly the others that couldn't join us today. Does the GROW leadership, do you imagine that they have a role to play in driving education on this? Would they be one of the conduits to this conversation for the community?
Absolutely. So I think that the GROW structure and the GROW committees are a network of trusted voices, and that's what we need during this process of education and encouraging response. So using your trusted voice to share information, to share your enthusiasm about the census, to show that you trust the process. Of course, with collecting information to the federal government and online, there is going to be a trust barrier that we're going to have to overcome. But you all as community leaders, and I think all of the publicity about the successful efforts that you've already had with the GROW communities will lend a great trust value to your voice. And so it'll be very important for you to hop on board and help share this information and encourage a good response in your area.
Great. Tanya, any questions from Buffalo?
I think the only question I have is, you get a lot of people that are concerned about the personal information or their perceived personal information. How much personal, or what can you advise, like what kind of information that, is it like name, date of birth, that kind of stuff? How personal does the information get, and how is the government ensuring that what is gathered when you're dealing with that kind of information is being protected for, because we live in an age where people are constantly having identity theft occur, and that's a big concern for people. So can you advise like how that information is gathered, how personal it is, and how it's being protected?
Yes, good question, and it's going to be an ongoing concern, definitely. I've already received a number of phone calls from folks about this. So yes, it will be collecting very personal information, names, birth dates. It'll be attached to addresses, income levels, modes of commuting to work. So there's a number of pieces of information that will be collected. I don't have the entire list of questions right in front of me to tell you specifically what else, but yes, it will be information that is sensitive. Of course, the census has been updating their systems and testing them over the last few years to make sure that their databases are secure. And we have good faith in the federal government that they are keeping our information secure. And so just to the best that their consultants that are providing internet security for our nationwide database systems, they will be protecting our information. And I think that, so far, I think the federal government has done a fairly good job. They haven't had any of the major data breaches that we've seen from private corporations. So I think that the federal government has a pretty good track record from that standpoint, but it is going to be something sensitive that we have to be mindful of and talk through. And it's the nature of the day and age that we live in. Unfortunately, nothing is 100% secure or fail-proof, but we're going to have to trust the system.
Okay. And then I know you had mentioned that there's a lot of funding things that are based on census numbers in your area. What are, I guess, like if you wanted to get some maybe more specific things of like, that we could say, well, okay, if we're not having an accurate count in our community, there are certain, funding things that we wouldn't have access to or that we might gain access to. Is it like the more numbers, it increases your likelihood for certain funding, or, how does that work?
Yeah, so accurately reporting household income is very important for communities, particularly small communities, because there's a number of grant programs that look at the income rates for your community to see whether the community or organizations within the area are eligible for grant funds. Community Development Block Grant is probably the biggest example of that, where they rely on, if your community has 51% of moderate to income to low income population, then you're eligible for those funds, and those can go a really long way. So, responding to the census accurately with the right number of people living in your household and their names, and then your household income and individual income is very important for a number of those programs. And then, of course, counting the children appropriately will impact school district funding, early childhood education, daycare program funding, and other programs like that. So just making sure that the information is accurate when you respond will help the community, for sure.
Aurora,
and then if we want to get information on how we can help spread the word, do we just contact you guys directly?
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Tanya. Aurora, other questions from you guys? Shannon, you're muted, so if someone's asking, can't hear you guys.
Nope, we don't have any more questions at this time.
Okay. Jason, I know we're almost at the top of the hour. I've got two really quick questions. One is, are you done recruiting people locally to be census workers? And if not, is there an opportunity to hire and create some incremental temporary jobs locally? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so no, the census is not finished hiring locally or regionally or nationwide for that matter. They did receive an overwhelming response to the first few rounds when they were soliciting for job applications. So they do have a stack of people who have signed up online to express their interest, and they'll be going through those. The peak recruitment period for the census will begin October to December-ish. So there's still going to be plenty of opportunity for folks who would be interested in working for the census. And I'll say, when I was, 2010, I was finishing college and I worked for the census. It paid really well. Got to know some really great people that I'm still friends with almost a decade later. So it's a really good experience that I would encourage anybody if you're looking for a part-time or some additional work, or even just to get to know kind of the internal workings or get a unique experience. It's a great opportunity, and they're going to be hiring several people, not just to actually be the census takers that go out in the field, but I processed payroll for the census, and so there will be a number of opportunities for folks to find employment with the Bureau for sure.
And you apply online. I'm assuming there's a link that we can send out.
Yes, I can find that direct link, but even if you just Google census jobs, you could probably find the link to their website.
Okay, and last question, is there a mechanism for us to know who has filled out the census and who has not, so we can do targeted outreach in certain scenarios, or is that mechanism not available?
You would not be able to identify specific households. Just because that's protected data. You can look back at 2010 data and see what census tracts had a low response rate. Here in our region, we had 3 of the most low response rates for the state, but the biggest one was the census tract that Missouri State University is in Springfield, and that was because there was a lot of confusion in 2010 and not very good marketing or messaging about where students should say that they were living April 1st. And so that was probably the biggest undercount or lack of response within our region. And then the other 2, I think, were in rural Taney and Greene counties. But you can go online and you can go to our website and find that map and see what percentage response rates they had in 2010 for that census. But I don't believe they'll be able to release, data as the 2020 census is occurring of who didn't respond. It is important to note, again, it is not legal for somebody to respond to the census on somebody else's behalf. So if you don't think that your neighbor has responded, you cannot go online and fill out the census for them. Just let them do it themselves, and just talk to your neighbors and encourage them to respond.
Okay, great. So if it's okay, maybe one of the next steps we can take, Jason, is I can follow up with you and figure out, if there's half a dozen bullet points of next steps that our community members can take. And in this case, I'm thinking specifically to grow community leaders. We can arm them with the information. We've got a marketing outreach team in each community. So even if we want to let local residents know about the upcoming job opportunities, part-time work, so we can help get the word out, and I can work with you, and then we can get that messaging out to our communities.
Yeah, and we jumped into questions, but I did have one more slide on my presentation that had some action steps that I just wanted to leave everybody with. Just basically sharing what we've talked about today, and watching for additional updates from us and from the Census Bureau. And share the content that's coming out about the census. You can sign up to receive email alerts and newsletters from the census directly or from us. My contact information is on there as well. You can grow your local partnerships, increase civic engagement, start engaging students and other innovators to get ideas of how to reach out to your communities, work with your utility providers to talk to them about putting information in their billing. And then you can use the online mapping tools to learn more about the hard to count areas in your community. And then, of course, reach out to us to help identify funding support and outreach efforts that we can use throughout the region. And one thing I did want to touch on, one of the questions about the confidentiality for the census. There is a handout that we provided at our kickoff meeting for our Regional Complete Count Committee about keeping census data confidential. It's important to note that if somehow somebody gets a hold of somebody's responses to the census, it is against federal law to use that information against somebody or in any other way that is not for census use. So if there is any sort of a compromise, regardless of whatever that person is trying to do or hold against you, it is against federal law and it would go back on that person. So there's some more information on the census website about how they keep that information confidential and what the ramifications would be if that got into the wrong hands.
Excellent. All right, Jason, thank you so much for your time. This has been tremendously helpful. Team, I just did a quick math. So we left $8 billion in the last, 9 years. And we've got about 6 million people living in Missouri. So that's about $1,300 per individual that we left on the table. So let's make sure that we can recoup those dollars in the next decade. Jason, thank you. Thank you all for everyone for participating. And we will connect up with you in 4 weeks for our next topic. Take care. Have a good day.
Thank you.